Great. Well, welcome everyone to today's town hall about ChatGPT and how to use that in the contact center environment. I think everyone is interested in this topic because it is relatively new and has a massive amount of potential that all of us are looking forward to. I just a quick bio on myself. My name's Adam Bulkey. I'm a managing partner of Alignment Advantage Group, which is a call center consulting company that specializes in optimization and employee engagement. Been in the centers for about 30 something years and former VP of Fortune 500s and the like. And I'm excited to be here with Fred. Fred is our resident expert, our technical guru that knows this stuff inside and out, not just this, but he helps other companies as well with all sorts of the technical aspects related to contact center. So excited everybody's here. I think today's going to be a great forum, and that's really intended to be a forum discussion. We want to have a lot of engagement with you guys. So feel free to jump in and add your thoughts as we go. Fred, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so let's hit the next slide and let's hop right in. Again, as you guys know, these are open forums. I'm going to try to do my best to entertain, educate, and give some information. And then the most important part is I want to learn from you as much as you do, because as David referenced, this is moving so fast and so much is going on in our industry that, I really want to get some insights from all of you, how you're utilizing it, what you're seeing in the space, and let's have an open dialogue about this stuff. But I've got a quick story. So G.I. Joe, most people probably are looking at that thinking, what the hell does that have to do with AI? Well, let me tell you a little bit about me. When I was a kid, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I had gotten this G.I. Joe castle thing for a Christmas gift. And this kind of speaks to my nature. I pulled it apart because it had this laser that went across the front of it that would set off an alarm and notify when, an enemy enters the gates of this, right? So I pulled that whole thing apart within a month. And I had placed that laser in front of my door in my bedroom so that when somebody opened up my door, the alarm would go off. And what this story, along with uses of motors to create different ways to shoot things, I always had this nature of trying to understand how something worked at a fundamental level, not at the base level of writing code, working on the circuitry or the boards or soldering or all that stuff, but just fundamentally, how did it work? And then how could I apply it in my life to get whatever outcomes I wanted? And I did this throughout my entire childhood into adulthood. And I figured out that actually it's kind of a tool that has helped me get to where I am. So what? I started out as an agent. I was an agent on the phone, grew into leadership, ran call centers, helped companies start new ones. And then about 20 years ago, got pulled into the software side and found my passion and love for software. Another thing, funny enough, about 13 years ago, I ran into a company out of Montreal that was working on a kind of a big data project. And they had created a concept of a virtualized bot that looked and had human features and would chat with somebody online. And this was back when, if you guys remember 13 years ago, sometimes I don't remember last week. So, but just to kind of frame it up, this was a time when chat was really starting to really take hold. Most people were putting chats, on their website and starting to try to figure out how to manage it. Pre-social media, post-chat coming on. And this technology, I got excited because I saw it. And I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Let me figure out how this thing works. And then how can I apply it, operationally, for clients and people in the industry. And as I got to learn it, it was really my first exposure to supervised learning and artificial intelligence. What really excited me about this is they had the ability to spider unstructured data. And if you remember back in the days when we were all learning about SEO and spidering websites and how Google learned about why you should come up in a search, they took that concept and put it out into unstructured data formats. So like PDF files, Word documents, and they figured out how to scour these and start to categorize and build what is referred to as taxonomies. Think of it as basically the data structure underneath an artificial intelligence that allows it to say, this answer or this question falls into this category and most likely is this answer. So they built this, and we jointly worked together to bring out what I believe was one of the earliest forms of chatbots. Brought it to market, spent 3 months having, hundreds of conversations, and absolutely nobody bought it. A lot of conversations and a lot of money spent, and nobody bought it. So this is what opened up my eyes to the potential of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data within our space. Because up until that point, we've always been, I tell everybody, the contact center industry has always been KPI driven. Ever since my EIS green screen days, we managed, talk time, wrap time. We understood, number of calls, how that impacts the actual performance and all the likes, around structured data. What up until that point I didn't even think about was the ability to analyze, non-structured data. And just for those people that don't understand, structured data is like you name a field, with a particular name, and you generally know what's going to be within that field, right? So it's structured. Whereas unstructured data is large text. And then over the last 5 years, another reason why So What is I've actually spent the last 5 years either working with directly or evaluating software companies in our space for go-to-market strategies through, what we refer to as the channel in the industry. So I've been able to gather visibility from infrastructure to modeling, to go-to-market strategies, and understand how people are applying it on the software side. And then in some instances, bringing that down to the actual user base, that knowledge, and helping them select technology. Now, I solely today work with the software vendors. So that's why I'm here. But we're going to go over a quick history of AI, because I believe that, first of all, if you want to understand where we're going, you got to understand where we came from. And I'm not going to go into super depth, and I promise there's no pop quizzes at the end of this. But this is to get an understanding of where we came. Some of you may know some of this stuff, may not be aware of some of it, but it's interesting, maybe as a AI geek, to understand some of this stuff and the way it's transpired. So in 1947, Alan Turing came up with the idea of an intelligent machine. So in 47, he started talking about the idea of a machine learning the way we do. He also developed the Turing test, which is still to this day kind of the modern measuring stick on whether we consider a artificial intelligence system closer to an AGI, which is general intelligence, right? The singularity is much bigger, but the Turing test nonetheless still withstands today. And then in 64, the actual very first conversational or chatterbot, as they called it, was built in 1964 through MIT, the Dr. Joseph Weizenbaum. So this was the very first time in 64. So basically from 64 on, there was people developing on it and working on it. But the next real big development that we would have saw, or that, that happened, was Watson coming out in 2011. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but it won Jeopardy. It played against grandmasters in chess. Watson was the big deal, right? And for us, Watson actually came into our industry, and IBM started to show its head at conferences and started to talk about the advantages of Watson. And this was super early stages of artificial intelligence utilization inside the contact center. So jump ahead. So 17, this concept of transformers, not Autobots and Decepticons, but transformers and artificial intelligence actually came out, and Google put out a blog post, in essence, describing how transformers would change artificial intelligence and machine learning for the future. GPT-1 actually came out in 2018. Subsequently, 2 came out in 19, 3 came out in 20, and 2021. There was a huge leap forward, and over 20 major advancements happened within 2021. So at that point in time, Facebook, Google, BAI, Microsoft, everybody started to go and recognize the potential of this because of that transformation of, funny enough, transformers. And I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of transformers, but think about it this way. Basically, the word bank could mean a river bank, could mean an actual physical bank, but depending on words and the way they come out, it changes the meaning, right? Whereas computer systems had a hard time really doing that by itself up until the transformer development, and hence which led to GPT. And I'll get into ChatGPT and GPT-4 and kind of those descriptors, but know that you don't have to know what a transformer is. I learned this lesson early. About 4 years ago. I tried to do a speech much like this. I stood in front of a group, except it was all me, and I tried to teach artificial intelligence and some of the core model ideas, concepts, and it was absolutely the worst because nobody really cared. They wanted to talk about how it impacted them. So don't think you have to know all this stuff. Just know, I think it's interesting to see the actual timelines to this, because this has changed. And the reason why we're all so curious, and also there's a lot of people around the world who are nervous about this, is because the acceleration and the speed of the changes that are happening. And we've never seen anything like this before. So anyways, so real quick, 57 major advancements in AI models. And understand these 57 up to today, 28, these are significant model changes, not a product was built that's some fancy chatbot. These are big changes in the actual way that AI and machine learning works fundamentally. And to recognize that from 47 to basically 17, we had very little progress, and it exploded over the next short period of time. To today, where we're at, why we're all here talking about it, is the overall success of ChatGPT. So next slide. So real quick, introduction. Why are we all so fascinated by this? So first of all, ChatGPT, we've all heard it. You would have to basically live under a rock to not have heard of this, because essentially in 5 days of launch, it smashed every software or technology launch, including the iPhone, by coming to 1 million users within 5 days. 5 days, 1 million users. Never happened before in the history of anything. And by now, we're already 100 million users, actually by January, 100 million users, and 1 billion visits to ChatGPT via OpenAI. So 1.6 visits and 1.6 billion visits in March. That's a lot. That is a whole lot. And that's why everywhere we turn, everything is artificial intelligence. Next slide. So to be super clear, what is ChatGPT? So ChatGPT in itself is a user interface. It falls into the generative AI category, where it can actually generate text in ChatGPT's instance. With GPT-4, it now can intake text and images and output text and images, but that's more of the difference in advancements between 3.5 to ChatGPT-4. But essentially, you drive ChatGPT through prompts. And this is what Adam referenced, he was playing around with yesterday, was, how you communicate with this in order to get direct responses. Now, GPT-4 is where we get into what is actually under the hood of ChatGPT, which is a large language model. You'll hear LLMs being thrown out all over the places. Really, the big jumps came in 4. 3.5 was back in November when ChatGPT was launched, November of last year. It was 3.5. And the advancements into GPT-4 were significant. Like, they were using 3 times larger training data models. The speed at which they were moving was significantly more. There's accuracy rates were better. yada, yada. But what I think one of the significant changes that will impact us is actually the development and the concept of APIs and how to access GPT-4 and all future models through APIs. So for those that don't know, APIs are basically a common language that one computer system can talk to another one. It's what we use for modern integrations, right? As simple as that. But the addition of adding APIs on that actually allowed organizations, software companies, general organizations, anybody to build and bring their own data models in combination with the GPT-4 large language model in order to create outputs, that changed the game. And there's a lot of reasons we'll get into, as we're having a conversation. And also another thing that's often confused about this is GPT. Everybody thinks it's OpenAI's term. It's actually not. It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And again, back to the transformers, right? But you'll see GPT actually showing up in a lot of companies' information, but it's not ChatGPT. It's not GPT-4 from OpenAI. It could be a GPT model that they're building on their own. It could be from an alternate third party, but GPTs are going to be a standard of bringing in these large language models into day-to-day life in general. So next slide. So I've thrown a lot at you guys. We're going to take a quick poll, but more importantly, I'd love to hear from you guys. And Adam, I think you can kind of start out with this. I'd love to hear, on the poll, and let's talk about this a little bit. Who has personally or professionally used ChatGPT in the UI UX side? Who has gone out, done some prompts? What have you done? What's been your experience? Adam, you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I'll be interested to hear this as well. I think a lot of people, it's a relatively new technology. I know, based off your first slide, it's only been around for a period of time, this recent version. And what I was just at the call center conference a couple of weeks ago in Vegas, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting is there is a ton that this is pretty much all that people talked about was there's a ton of different vendors out there that are trying to be first to market and offer different solutions. Some things that are I know people are concerned about is related to security, for instance, patient. I saw Jason's comment in here about the healthcare, right? It's got to be behind a cloud, right? Behind the firewall to the point that there's, we're not jeopardizing any confidentiality issues. But just a couple things that I'm just going to mention real quick is I think a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon with this and quickly are saying, I'm going to save this amount of workforce time, right? It's going to give me efficiency. I'm not going to need to staff up for my usual ramp up that I have over the summer months that I always have to staff up for. I'm just going to caution people, don't count your chickens before they're hatched is the old phrase. And there's a reason it's still one that everybody recognizes, is that you can really get yourself into some serious trouble if it's not going to quite deliver what you thought it would at this time. So go into it cautiously. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Make sure that you're implementing in a strategic way so that you don't have a problem where you're now stuck with not having the amount of people you need in order to, just in case it doesn't work to the point that you expect it to. So just throwing that out as little words of experience. Don't count the chickens before they're hatched. Okay, so the poll right now, you got 54% of this population have actually used ChatGPT and implemented it. So I'm very curious to get people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear who's used it and how have you used it?
This is Alan. I've used ChatGPT. I'm currently in job transition and I'm using it to actually understand the companies that I'm researching, going in and asking for it, as a corporate recruiter, give me an analysis of what this company is, what do they do, what is their market size, who's involved with it. And I've taken that to a next level by saying, give me a SWOT analysis of, if I were to understand this company, what should I be talking about during that interview process that might have reference points to this? And I'm doing that with the more advanced GPT-4. just because it has more recent data included in it.
Right.
That's a great example. Alan, let me ask you something. When we were down at the luncheon in Atlanta, did you hear much conversation around ChatGPT, or did you talk to people privately there? I know there were a lot of people there.
I think people were talking about it, but I didn't have any substantive conversations about it where people had really used it for anything. And actually between that event and this event is when somebody clued me in to here's how you can really use it in a job search context. And so that in a 3-week period, I think that was about 3 weeks ago, that's where that development has come from. And it's happening that quick that I'm just learning more and more about it as it's as it becomes available and we have conversations.
How'd you recognize, and did somebody tell you this or coach you around the prompt engineering to say, imagine you're a recruiter for XYZ company. How'd you learn that piece? Because that's important to understand just from a ChatGPT utilization perspective.
I learned it from a presentation similar to this that somebody had given to an executive group that I'm part of, where they said, hey, here's how you can use it. And I said, wow, I've never thought of using it in that context. And so I'm the generative AI. I'm learning. I'm learning from all of them.
And that's excellent, because that's what we're trying to do today.
Yep.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kate, you got your hand up?
Yes, I've used it extensively. I've used it in marketing. I've used it to write a white paper. I've used it to write a press release. And I have a new director as well who wanted my goals. So don't tell him this, you guys. But when he wanted my list of goals, I went into ChatGPT and it, spit it out like that. And then it just took me 10 minutes to turn in something that looked like I'd spent a long time on it. So I'm really impressed about it. I work, for those of you who don't know me and my organization, I work for a small nonprofit called National Telecommuting Institute. There's not a lot of information about us out there. And a lot of the information that is out there is something that has been written by me. And so it was really interesting to me when I was using GPT chat and asking it information about the, NTI that I work for. I could see where it had parsed the information that I had put out there over the past 8 years as I've been working there, although again, not totally up to date, but it wasn't my words. But it was recognizable. I'm like, yes, I know where it got that information from, and it blew me away. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
We've used it for training materials. So we've pushed our training materials through the tool and said, okay, make this relevant to a Gen Z audience. So then it's come back and reworded it or reformatted it into something that would make a lot more sense. So we've used it for tools internally for making the content more relevant.
Nice.
I've used it. What I would love to hear is the prompt, because I know somebody who created a prompt that they can kind of go back to it over and over. That would be amazing to figure out. But I know I have similar stories, so I won't just repeat, but I do know somebody who took all of their old sales materials that a consultant had done in this voice, right? Like kind of the voice of your brand, dumped it in, created a prompt, and then for all future things that they needed to write, they said, write it with this voice. So
that's good use too. Yep. Yeah, I think I've noticed up earlier on here there the concern about, is this going to replace agents, and is this going to cause a problem? I think there is, somebody else mentioned too, it's not always 100% accurate. I think you put that in there, Lon. It is something that we have to use our human judgment to do this. I asked GPT yesterday, how can it help me in a call center? What can it do for me? And it started talking about, it's kind of a virtual assistant for call center agents, right? It can kind of give you quick answers to quick issues. And, long term, I think it'll give us the ability to be able to kind of listen in and provide real-time chats to the agent to help them with the customer. But the one thing that I said, then I asked it, will it replace knowledge base or traditional knowledge bases? And it said no, because you always have to have the human element. The human has to kind of have the judgment and insert that into the equation of the interaction in order to make sure that it's accurate. And we've all, heard about the GPS effect, and I think Fred, you're going to speak to that a little bit in a minute. But you know, I was traveling down in downtown Los Angeles with my brother, who's lived here for 25 years, and we were following the GPS instructions with the address that we put in there, and he kept looking at it going, this isn't right, but he kept following the GPS anyway. And of course, when it said, okay, you're here, we ended up about 20 minutes from our destination. So, you know, we always, as humans, have to still be fact checking in our heads and using our judgment to be able to use this technology so it helps us, you know, provide better experiences for both the agent, which is a big piece of, you know, their frustration is they don't have great technology, but also the customer, so they have great customer experiences.
Yeah, that actually leads to a really good kind of point that I think everybody should understand. I mean, first of all, let's talk about why does ChatGPT in particular and large language models feel so threatening within our industry. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had, people coming bluntly to me and saying, hey, will this stuff replace agents? And the reason why it does is because a large language model is basically conversations, right? It's ability to read, interpret, and understand data and respond back to answer a particular question, which is essentially what we do inside customer experience, customer services is we, you know, we listen to problems, you know, we use our information at hand to answer those to try to come to a good solution, right? And this is what these large language models are built. But the cautionary piece of this is, as Adam was alluding to, you have to be really careful. First of all, GPT-4 is only trained up to, I think, the middle of 22 on data. Although GPT-4 also has the ability with some tool sets to go out and scour the internet. But as we all know, the internet is completely true. And everything on the internet, we all believe. You know, but then there's another piece to this that really gets into kind of the human concerns, which is the hallucinations. How many people have heard of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and Bard's hallucinations? So we've got a few people. So this may sound really odd that a computer program is hallucinating, but it is. What you can find is if you do enough prompts, maybe you start by looking yourself up, as Kate mentioned, you know, and start to look at what it produces. Sometimes it will produce facts that are absolutely not true, that absolutely do not exist anywhere. And it somehow hallucinates that this is the right answer. And it can be pretty good at using convincing language to say this is the right answer. And herein lies the challenge with these models is that, first of all, if you ask an engineer, and I've watched, you know, interviews, read articles about this on why these transformers are actually coming up with wrong, incorrect dates, data, information, or pure hallucinations. And if they're really being honest, they can't answer, which us as people who develop things and put things out to the world that function and help society, we always know that the motor uses the fuel, which drives the pistons, which pushes the car down the road for simplicity's sake, right? They can't do that in some cases. So this is all why this fear around this stuff continues to boil up at a more of a global, you know, from a global perspective. But for us in particular, we have to be very, very aware of, you know, hey, I got to know going into this, I better fact check this thing. Because it may not come up with an absolute true response, no matter how convincing it sounds. I've seen that question. So how is it any different from humans? The fact that it's a computer and we're being convinced that it's infallible, it's no different. I mean, we as humans, in our intelligence, we only have so much capacity in our hard drives, right? We only have so much RAM to process that. I mean, we very much function exactly the same. Sometimes we hear something and we take it as fact and we haven't done our own fact checks. But we're talking about a computer program that's developed by us that's now starting to show signs of human-like behavior. Now, some argue that actually ChatGPT 4 in its current state can pass the Turing test. meaning that, it can fool 30 people that they're talking to a human versus talking to a machine. But nonetheless, I mean, it's still not AGI. It's not there, but it's super interesting that we trust computers, we trust our phone, we trust Google, we trust a lot of things in technology. And for the most part, it steers us pretty right. Although this is something you just need to be aware of. Just like going to the most educated person on a certain subject, going to ChatGPT to find answers does not mean that it is the correct answer. Do your own research.
Yeah, I think Ron, you're bringing up a really good point in your chat, and good answer, Fred, to that point. I think the one thing we want to add to this is probably, as you're implementing, you need to consider the value using ChatGPT can give you against the risk of what it is you're asking it to do. So if you have a low risk, high value transaction that you can use ChatGPT for, do it. Like you said, humans make mistakes too. It may not be any worse. And matter of fact, it's probably going to be better. But the reality is, probably some of the temptation might be to use it for high risk things because it's so cool. And we have so much faith in the technology, but just be, as you're putting it in, just be thoughtful about how you're approaching it. Make sure that you're balancing the value against the risk.
Yeah, I mean, it is. The comments are moving too fast. I missed it. Somebody said something about. Anyways, let's move on. I know we've only got an hour. There's so much to cover. So I also want to touch on one of the things the pre-show that was recommended. Before I get into this, let's have a general conversation real quick about artificial intelligence versus ChatGPT, or just in general. So artificial intelligence, and I'm not going to go into the coaching because I already tried to do this once, as I shared earlier. It failed miserably. People were bored. They don't want to know. It's a so what factor, right? But it's good to understand artificial intelligence is the general big bubble that we're throwing everything in, and ChatGPT, GPT-4, and these large language models just happen to be the buzzwords within that circle. And there's a lot. The machine learning, neural networks, and you can get it down into all the different modelings and different types of artificial intelligence that are utilized for different types of queries or problems to solve. There's a lot, and I've gone down that rabbit hole, and it's super fun, but most people don't care. So I think first, understand that GPT is that large language model that I explained. And the reason why it is so important for our industry and why it will have an impact is because it is a large language model, which is designed for understanding and communicating information back and forth. So the inputs have changed, but it is rapidly evolving. So that's why GPT-4 is or large language models are such an important piece of our industry. We should be talking about. So the poll went up. Adam, do you want to take a second? Have you, in any of your consultant projects, anything that you've worked on, with different enterprises, have you ran into anybody actually implementing and starting to create pilots or projects around, particular GPT-4 or large language models?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't. Everyone is maybe in the same boat as a lot of this audience, is that, like I said, there's a lot of vendors out there. I think a lot of people are doing a lot of research right now to figure out how to best approach this. So the people that I've been speaking with in my consulting side haven't used it yet, but they're actively trying to do it. What I found is interesting is I went through another discussion not too long ago, but 75% of the leaders in call centers believe that it's going to have a huge impact, and 45% of them are actively sourcing or investing. So they're going after it.
Hey, Kirby, you're on. Have you had any experience directly with clients implementing this?
No, I have not worked with anyone yet. would like to get involved with it at some point in the near future. I think, some of the key comments that I've heard that are very important for everyone to remember is about going cautiously. I mean, it's just like you see today, as I, as a consumer, dealing with different websites and people's chatbots that they implement and then they don't pay any attention to, and it doesn't work properly. And then in terms of thinking about the investment within a company, I think companies need to understand that it takes resources to implement and to manage and maintain something like this going forward. And everybody's focusing on ways that can help you improve service, save money. Yes, great. You always want to invest in technology that can understand and know how to use and deploy the product. So.
Or Vicki Brackett, any thoughts on that? I know you guys have been doing a lot around this area.
Yeah, absolutely. So LivePro is a knowledge management system. So it provides that filter, right, from the dynamic information that would come in from a ChatGPT. And Fred's right. You've got to have that filter there. You've got to have that place to make sure that the information is accurate before it goes either to the chatbot or a customer portal or an app on the customer side, or to the agent who's delivering that information, whether it be phone, email, chat, text, or social media.
So the poll results showed that none of us have. And let me share where I've seen it on the vendor side. And I think this is one of the impacts that we're all going to see in short order, and we're already seeing if you're paying attention. There are thousands of software vendors in our industry now, globally. Just in the US, or I should say North American markets, as of last year, there were 200 plus CCaaS vendors, the core contact center, the Five9s, Genesys, NICE, yada, yada. I can go on listing them, and I've looked at a lot of them. There's also CRMs that impact us, the WEM, I shouldn't call it CCaaS, by the way. I don't know if you guys saw, but they're all trying to rename themselves as a CX platform now. So that's a new one on me. But there's voice analytics, there's all kinds of different artificial intelligence and agent assistant programs that are coming out on a daily basis. And these are accelerating because of the development of all this stuff, because of the land grab around GPT-4. So what I've seen is that existing vendors who have the budget and have the R&D team to do it have already started to build in in particular, maybe they're a Google shop, maybe they're a Microsoft, hence OpenAI, maybe they're an Amazon and they're leveraging, Amazon's tool sets with Lex, and there's all kinds of tool sets out there, but these vendors are rushing to implement large language into some of their own tool sets. So why does that matter? Is the so what? I keep coming back to so what because I believe it's an important thing to ask every time we're having these kind of conversations. The so what is a lot of these tools are going to be built in to existing platforms. We're also going to see in my belief, and this is something I feel pretty confident in saying, is that we're going to see a consolidation and drop off of the number of vendors that are, entering and existing and competing in the market. I think that's natural to happen because, not just the downturn in the economy, but when you start opening up APIs and give complete access to large language models that actually are not that big to run, they're really hard to develop, but they're not that big to run and not that complex. Not that complex in how a modern SaaS company could deploy it alongside it. We're going to see a definite consolidation and acceleration in that process. It had already kind of started because of the downturn in the economy. But that's going to accelerate super fast. So that means that we very well may have access as you guys as contact center, executives and leaders, you may already have access to this stuff coming down the pipe that you weren't even aware of. Will it cost you more money to use? I mean, SaaS companies are in the business, just like all of our businesses are, other than the .orgs, to make money. So more than likely, there'll be some things that'll be added on top of it. But I do believe that this will become part of most core platforms moving forward. But just out of curiosity, so nobody started implementing GPT-4 on this yet, but how many people, just quick raise of hands, we don't need a poll. How many people have started using artificial intelligence in general in some way in speech analytics, agent guidance tools? How many people have already started doing that? So we've got a couple of people, but you notice something, not everybody raised their hand, right? I mean, even though we've all been talking about AI for the last, 5 years, I've been looking at it for over 13 in this industry, only a handful of people. Now, this is a small sample, right? We need to understand it a little bit bigger. But I think even when you look at the Gartner reports and adoption rates, artificial intelligence itself hasn't been heavily adopted in our industry. And why is that? I find this so fascinating. Is there anybody in the audience that's an early adopter? And when I say that what it means to me is I define early adopters as people that are willing to sacrifice in order to work with and develop and work on new technology, new thought process. Was anybody already implementing AI before it became a buzzword?
It was kind of on the early side of AI, but it was expert system technology. Back about 25 years ago, I built one of the first big expert systems for Exxon.
Yeah, okay, fascinating. What define that? I don't know.
It was a learning system that would learn from its behaviors and would adjust. So rather than it being hard coded in certain platforms and stuff, it was designed to create the tax entries for the movement of pipe and materials for Exxon around the country.
That's super fascinating. So I'm not going to get all geeky, but David, I mean, you and I need to catch up anyways. It's been too long. I'd love to hear about that. Because there's, like I said, I bumped into this stuff 13 years ago. I mean, this stuff has been around. You guys saw from the dates and times to understand when this stuff started. AI is not new, but the LLM is different. And, I'm also a macroeconomics guy. I love to wake up and watch the markets. And one of the worst things you can say in macroeconomics is this time is different. Right. And that holds true, across a lot of things in life, but this time really is different. And this technology from a conversational perspective and its potential long term is huge. So I'm not a fear monger. I believe there's a ton of great things from AI that we're going to be able to do in this industry. We're going to be able to have insights into data that we never thought we could. And some of this stuff is already existing. So is there any voice analytics users out there on this one? Anybody already using artificial intelligence? Perfect. Jason, first gen, second gen, I don't know if you know how to define that, but share what you can.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not IT, so I don't know what generation this is of our technology, but we're using a vendor called Authentics, where they take they just literally sit on the top of our ACD. They take all our WAV files, they analyze them, and we get real-time data and insights into them. And they're listening for both what's being said and how it's being said, right? Which is key. We're direct to patients. That's a big piece for us from a healthcare perspective. We're very new. We've had it for the last 6 months, so we're still sort of playing with it, but it has really benefited, and we're using it from a compliance perspective. So how compliant are we to some of our protocols when handling some of these calls from patients? So that was our business case. So if we improve compliance, then patients get a better outcome. So they're probably more likely to stay on our dialysis machines. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Awesome. So is that post call? Is it analyzing the actual post call, or is it live?
Yeah, post call, but I'm also working with our vendor who does our knowledge management to say, okay, how can we then link it all in, right? Because then that will add value back to our reps. But it's post call today, yeah.
Okay. So, and there's a reason I bring this up in particular, because this is a perfect example of just understanding as an industry, better questions to ask, what really is going on and why this conversation is so important. So the reason why most analytics is done post-call is not because we can't compute live. Obviously, there are tools out there that are doing live agent assistance and guidance today. The problem with most environments is some segment of your telephony is actually done in a single thread, meaning that the whole call both the customer and the agent side is being transferred across in a single path, right? Whereas modern technology and really what is needed to do proper live, guidance and analytics is dual threaded or stereo. And there's, hertz to it. And there's all kinds of technical stuff you don't need to know. The question you need to know is my technology mono or is it stereo, from the voice paths? And the reason why that's important is so it can accurately tell who's the agent, who's the customer, understand as it's transcribing that, assigning proper weights to different sides of it and being able to do that. So that stuff is very, very real world today. And LLMs plugged in through APIs with other trained data from vendors will absolutely improve your rate of accuracies and all of that. So that's just a simple example today of how this can actually impact. Any agent guidance users out there? Live agent guidance?
I'm going to just make one point on that, just because I heard this yesterday in a different discussion, but ChatGPT has the ability to detect sarcasm. And it didn't have that in the past, right? So that's a newer function, which will improve its accuracy. So a good example is, hey, thanks for your help. It would mark that as, using that example, it marked that as a positive interaction. And now I can say, hey, that was a good one. But, it wouldn't in the past be able to say, hey, thanks for losing my luggage, right? It wouldn't have figured that out. And, that is why it's going to be more accurate as it becomes better trained, so to speak, with its natural language capabilities. So I think to your point, one of the things I heard that is there's so many great stories of what it can potentially do for us, and people are working on making it happen, such as, instead of, listening, we all record 100% of our calls, or a lot of us do, and then we're trying to find the ones that are the long ones, and maybe that's the ones that will have the most learning in them. The ChatGPT stuff will be able to look at all of that, give us here's the one that I think is the problem, here's the one that is a learning opportunity, here's what you should coach them on, and here's the 5 that I listened to over the last, yesterday that you can use for your agent coaching. That's a great time saver. And it'll be a lot more accurate than in the old days because it can now better analyze what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I've got a question for Kelly. Kelly, I know you're new to all this. Don't mean to pick on you, but given your vast background, and I know you've just recently stepped away from that, were there initiatives going on, and maybe tell people where you were? Anything that was going on that's relevant to what we're talking about here?
I think the one thing that we were doing, I was a former VP of CX for the Postal Service, and I left about a little over, well, it's almost 18 months ago. But the one thing that we were really looking at is, how could you use AI? I think someone mentioned that for serving up the knowledge management. That was the one area of how do you help that agent find all that information? I just, and so that was one of the areas that we were looking at. The other thing was how we could use it in the IVR with natural language in the future. So, but it really ended up being pretty mechanical what we came up with. It didn't really have a lot of AI in it. It was more just a chat bot that we ended up implementing, although it got really great response from our customers.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a great example of something that has actually evolved a lot. The idea of, so what we used to do with the chatbot that I told you about that I was looking at, we were actually scouring unstructured data, categorizing it, putting all the right, what they're called meta tags, which means you're basically defining something with a bunch of names that then make it easier to search, right? So we were using, the company I was partnering with, we were using more big data type technology to make the unstructured data structured so that then we could analyze it and get quicker responses, right? But originally, most of the chatbot stuff that was done for the predetermined questions and answers was decision trees. I mean, it was no different than what we were building traditional IVRs. It was just digital, really.
Yeah.
But that has since significantly changed. And some of the modern versions of agent guidance combined with knowledge bases, combined with all the structured and unstructured data, are creating some pretty amazing things, giving agent guidance. But you have to train it still, right? I mean, everybody wants to pitch this. And because I don't put my flag behind a particular software company today, I can tell you this: they all want to pitch it as some magic bullet that somehow is going to, solve all of your problems. The reality is it takes time, it takes effort, just like anything. It will take training and tuning to get it right. You'll have to have your internal team work with it. But it is a lot more capable of listening and understanding what is going on between the agent and the customer, and providing the agent with the right articles or information or data they need. And it's getting better at summarizing these big articles down into, here's what you need to say, Mr. Agent. And where most of the development I've seen on this stuff is in the sales technology. Because I don't know if you know this, but sales and MarTech, their multipliers, the value of their company and software is worth 10 to 20 times what the CX technology is. And they get funding a lot easier, yada, yada. So there's a lot of development going on. How are we doing on time?
Just a couple.
And we
minutes.
got about a minute left. I wanted to ask Barry if he had anything to throw on top of that.
I do. I just, Fred, I was going to ask you, I'm thinking about the consumer side of AI. And do you know of any research that's out there that's showing how consumers are accepting this technology and how they feel about interacting with AI versus a human? And are we getting to a place where call center agents are going to have to get used to the question, are you real? Is this a person or is this AI? How do consumers feel about this?
Yeah. So I have seen some Gallup stuff that has come out recently about consumer insights and information on AI. But this is, again, November of last year is when ChatGPT was launched. The acceleration of the conversations around that are changing, and the dynamics are changing very fast. One thing I would recommend is if you want to learn some insights about this industry in general and where artificial intelligence is heading. Last week, there was a Senate hearing on the way we actually govern, artificial intelligence. And there's every country in the world is trying to solve for this. Watch it on like 1.5 because God bless the senators, but some of them speak really slow. So speed it up to 1.5. You'll still completely understand the conversation. You won't lose anything at that speed. Trust me. I did it at 1.75. But you'll get some insights that are super interesting. I think the dynamics are changing so fast. What we all used to think back last year in like December when we started talking about prompt engineers, that has all changed. Tools out there are now using natural language to generate their own prompts to prompts the LLMs. And what that basically means is we can talk to something and it's going to develop the answer back to us in how we need it, based upon training. So there's some great stuff. Don't read. If you don't want to worry about the impact on society of artificial intelligence, don't read the Goldman Sachs report that came out like last week regarding the number of jobs that it'll replace or it should replace. There's so much, guys. I mean, I literally learn something new every single day and read or watch some piece of content that broadens my understanding. And if anybody tells you they know what the future of artificial intelligence is, they're either trying to sell you something, or something more.
Or their ChatGPT. I mean, we've done full circle. Right?
Yeah, there's that. We're full circle. So those that do want to stick around, I actually purposefully left an extra hour open after this.
The one thing I thought that was important was that you convey that you are, as a consumer, when they're interacting with a bot, that they mention that they're interacting with a bot. Don't try to pass them off as a human, because a couple things will happen if they're wrong, right? Or if they start acting a little weird. That's not good for your brand in any way, shape, or form, right? But if it's a bot, people will get it and they'll be like, oh, it's just a bot, you know, all right, let me talk to the rep, you know. And I think it's important to make that distinction, because this will become more tempting as we go to say, oh, let's make sure they think they're talking to a human. But
Well,
yeah.
And I think legislation based upon the Senate hearing last week, that was something that was definitively brought up, is that a lot of people, and I didn't see anybody object to it, but even the Altman, you know, the CEO from OpenAI, a lady who handles compliance for AI from Watson, and a scientist, you know, an AI, specialist. We're all there at the hearing, and even they agreed that, you know, I think we'll get legislation where you'll have to tell the audience that it's AI. You know, and I think it's only necessary. And for those people that are trying to pass bots off as humans, in order to save the CX experience, just be aware. I mean, you know, I get the idea. We tried it with IVRs. It failed miserably. I mean, they had the same story about IVRs replacing all the agents. Those of us that are old enough remember it. You know, just that's probably likely going to come in short order. Hopefully some personal data security laws for Americans, because we are so far behind on that stuff. And these models where they can scour the internet now, thanks to, you know, Bard and some of the new plugins with ChatGPT, or GPT-4, I should say. Yeah, I mean, we need some data privacy laws here in the States, without a doubt, to catch up with the rest of the world.
I think the other thing, I just saw Jason's point here on chat about, we ran into some patient focus groups where they're saying, hey, if it speeds up the process, I'm good to use it. I think that's the case, by the way, with every customer in any place, right? If you can guide the customer at the beginning of that interaction and you know what their issue is, man, they'll take snail mail if that's the fastest way they can get through it, right? They just need guidance on how to best interact with your company to get their problem resolved in the fastest and most efficient way. And if it's ChatGPT, they'll take it. If it's something else, they'll take that, right? And that's one thing that I also kind of caution all my customers about is, you know, you don't always have to have the latest and greatest in order to provide great customer experiences, right? You just need to guide your customer on the best way to get the best clear paths to use your company and to get their problem resolved. And if you can guide them initially, you're going to have a lot of value for the customer.
Yeah.
Great. There was something that we didn't answer, and I think this was from Angela had asked about slang. Are you familiar, Fred, with, you know, can it interpret slang now, and is it effective?
Yeah. So not only
Angela, that question isn't because you're doing a conference in Texas by any chance, is there?
No. So here's what, believe me, I use it often, and I wish I could like set aside hours each week just to study it, because I know I'm barely scratching the surface. But I guess so I use it for a press release, and then I'm like, oh, I got to turn this into like a blog post or LinkedIn. I'm like, no, I don't. ChatGPT can do it for me. So it wrote the press release, then I edited it, then I put it back in, and I said, here's how I write my blogs, capture my voice, and rewrite this so it turns it into a blog post.
Yeah.
So you are actually commented, like, or whatever, tagged in that. But what I wanted to do, and I think it has this ability, is say like, okay, well, now just remember this voice for every time. So I don't have to go back and even find a sample language. Like, is there a prompt that once it remembers, and I could dump more and more into it. It's like, okay, I'm learning more about you, more about you, more about you. Now I can produce something in your voice even faster.
Yeah. So first of all, understand that when you're dealing with ChatGPT in itself, and not the GPT-4 model, you're not building your own data structure in the back end, not adding your own stuff. It has a limit in the amount of data that it'll store. But there are people out there doing something called super prompts, which these are like the scientists and the data analysts and sometimes psychologists trying to figure out what's going on here. But they're developing super prompts that they continually test, these 4,000 or less word prompts, the prompt series, that basically gets a very elaborate response to whatever they're trying to solve. Some of them are heavy mathematicians. Some of them are, theorists combining two psychological theories. I mean, these scientific stuff, right? So you can, what I find interesting about ChatGPT, and this is why I warn people about it, that in particular use case, is because you can do the same prompt. And I don't know if you've tested this or not, Angela, you do the same prompt, exactly the same, twice in a row, and get different answers.
Right.
You can also prompt it once, get an answer, realize it's false, pick on it until it gives you an actual true answer. And yet it'll come up somewhere in between there, a couple of different answers that aren't quite accurate. And people have been trying to figure out why this is, and this goes back to those hallucinations. What I've heard as a reason why, and maybe this is interesting or not, but to me, it's super fascinating. What I've heard is that it's basically a tool designed to answer a question. In the end, they have programmed a tool that is designed to answer questions based upon a large language model that understands even down to the letter and tries to predict what you're going to type next. So it is so far advanced now that the transformers aren't even looking at single words, it's looking at lettering. So it's from that, because it's forced to answer a question, or its main purpose is to answer a question, just like us. If we were told our whole life depended on us just answering questions and, moving the person on to the next thing, we'd probably come up with some answers that weren't accurate also. And this is where some of the philosophical things around artificial intelligence start coming up. But what I'd say, Angela, is there are examples of prompts out there all over the place. You just got to do some digging. What I haven't seen is anybody put out a library for like us in this industry in particular. But I also believe that I know that there are software companies building on these models already. I mean, whether that'll be helpful for us trying to do this one-to-one, you meaning us to ChatGPT type of stuff. I suspect we'll continually change and train that model. But to go back to the question of slang, yes, in some cases when it's a regular common slang, but more importantly is its ability across multi-language. So we see it in one language. A lot of people utilize it across the globe in English, but it works in any language just about, and it works when you mix languages. So this thing, so when I say that the advancements of this thing are big, I mean, it really is. We struggled with multi-language prior to the LLM side for a long time in artificial intelligence, and it's not a struggle anymore.
Yeah, that's great. I see Maggie's comment here about we should also maybe continue the conversation ongoing in Slack, and I think that's a really great idea, Maggie, is that if we could maybe create a ChatGPT group or something that we know we could go into, because I guarantee you that this group that was listening today will come up with all sorts of ways to use ChatGPT that even the vendors haven't even thought of. I was having a conversation the other day with one, and they have a really cool use for it. It's great, but they didn't think, when you're call center guys, you think other ways too. You're like, wow, if you know that, then I could turn that around and I could find out who the best recruiting profile would be to match this customer type, and it was like mind blow for them because they hadn't even thought about that side of it, but that's the stuff that we'll be able to figure out because we're call center guys, right? So it would be great. I would love to listen in.
We can make that happen. I mean, that's not hard. The goal and objective with Slack as we see it is very simple. If the members want to know more about something, then create a channel for it, as opposed to creating a channel for something and then making sure that we try to extract everything for the members. So I'm hearing you say that you and Fred will help facilitate a ChatGPT and great ideas along with Jason. And and Angela will have her hand in that, I have no doubt. So yeah, that's totally fine. Well, but seriously, I think a repository for some ideas like what was shared is great, and it doesn't have to be high volume. You know, whatever people are experiencing as they come on, it's a great way for people to throw out ideas. So good idea. Any other comments before we wrap up?
So I just have a quick question because I am really interested in the language. So we make language tests, and part of what we do is like when we're making new prompts, we give it out to a sample of people and we try to get responses back. And obviously that takes time, that takes money. So we were like, oh, let's try to get some of these like language communication prompts and let's run them through ChatGPT. We did it and it was fine. They gave us some responses back. But one of the things that we noticed, we use the CEFR scale as well. So we'd say, give us an A2 level prompt or response, give us a B2 level response. And it would give us like varying degrees of complexity of language. But what we noticed was that it would never give us imperfect language. So something we asked it was, can you give us a natural response with human errors so that we can then turn around and use it for training? And that was something it couldn't do. Yeah. So is that something it can understand easily, just not produce?
So they have been training this model, so you can get there. What you have to do is prompt engineer it to finally convince it that it's willing to break the rules of English that it's been programmed to do. And this goes into...
That sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, it sounds crazy. But, I mean, you know, I don't know if you guys remember, there's been a couple of people out there who have done super prompts that have actually gotten ChatGPT to act like a drunken sailor. You know, for lack of a better term. You know, so with prompt engineering, you can get it to answer incorrectly or towards the manner, but you're going to have to test with a lot of language. You know, it's like, first of all, you got to tell it who you want it to answer as. Then you have to give it some guidelines around, you know, how you want the answers delivered, you know, and context to look at it. And if you have examples that you can upload and leverage, like I mean, what Angela was talking about, you just got to build and engineer the prompt so that ChatGPT will go against what they're programming it to do, which is be more accurate. So they've increased, I think, from 3.5 to 4, it was like 40% accuracy. Yeah, I mean, the numbers, it's from 3.5 to 4 are staggering. From 4 to 5 are going to be unbelievable. But yeah, you can get there. You just gotta figure out how to get it to disobey the rules.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So students have used like, answer me as if you're an English professor with blah, 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 and then give me a term paper basically in response to all of this stuff. Right. So they set it to tell what they wanted to who they wanted to emulate. And then they start prompting to figure out how to get the information. So start with the who, you know, and then start engineering the prompts down to say, you know, in general speak in slang, leveraging terms. Here's I mean, you can start to build it up. Now, there is a limit, but you can figure out the prompts to get it to do it. I'm sure of that.
Can I ask a question? You had mentioned earlier, there is a paid version that then you can do it. That's where you do some of the stuff. Okay. Cause I've just been, you know, tinkering.
Yeah.
And then I think the scary part for everybody, and there's no putting that when I say the person that I said wrote that super prompt, that they probably figured that out. They were on paternity leave. It wasn't stuff that they wrote themselves. It was something that they'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay a consultant throughout the years who had produced all of this content and copy and created the brand and did all of this. And they just ripped it. And now can, you know, doesn't have to use that person. But then that's the truth too, that you can steal from other companies. You can like look at a company and say, I like that brand. Now that's going to be mine. Like it is wild.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. And that was one of the things they talked about at the hearing. You know, I mean, they simplified it, but basically down to like musicians, right? You know, I want a Garth Brooks sound with a Alanis Morissette voice. And so who owns that? That's the big question. The artist will get paid for that eventually. And they will legislate that. But things like what you're talking about, where someone literally ripped off a consultant's or a company's, IP that a consultant, they spent money on to get written, that is the same thing as stealing someone's IP and utilizing it in another place. It's just right now it's the wild, wild west. We have no regulations. And that actually, the ownership of material, content, pictures, music, that I think will get solved in one way or another. Whether it'll change industries or not, that's to be determined. I have no answers to that. That doesn't scare me. What scares me is the bad actors, because it takes huge server farms and huge processing power to create these models. But if you look at the actual training data and the size of these models to run them, they're not big. I mean, they can fit on a really sophisticated thumb drive. That's the piece, the ability to take that, and we're already seeing it. There's been examples of people using voice deep fakes to call family members and say, hey, my car broke down. I'm in this place. Can you wire me this amount of money? Here's the bank account. And they're getting it done. There's people using artificial intelligence to create the most efficient phishing exercises, meaning not like phishing, but email phishing to get your username and passwords for certain types of accounts. Figure it out. But the bad actors in the meantime scare me. And what the potential is that. And just the other day, an explosion on near the Pentagon. There was an artificial intelligence deepfake, and it was put out on Twitter and went viral within minutes. Crash market stock, the stock market dropped 3 percentage points, I think, in whole before they figured out it was a deepfake. So the potential of this stuff is scary. How can it help us get better? And I think there's a lot of use cases for it. Some of the vendors will do the work for us. Some of the really big enterprises are already investing and shifting all of their, data scientists and some of their development teams over to how do we leverage LLMs at scale in customer experience. That's the stuff that I want to see the data. I want to see what they can, what they really were able to accomplish. And we're so early stage. I get a lot of anecdotal information that comes often from sources that I have to question, unless I see the core data.
All right, I think we wrapped it. Maggie has given me the controls for stopping this meeting and everything. She had to jump to an appointment. But yeah, I don't want to shut it off early, but so just one last go around. Anybody have any questions or anything they want to kind of check in on related to this topic?
No, that was fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. We really do appreciate everybody participating and all the thoughts and ideas around it.